Media was hit first by digital transformation. Now you see YouTube, Facebook, Netflix, etc. dominating the media landscape, whereas the local newspapers and the national newspapers, etc., even TV channels are trembling, and some of them have gone under. The next industry that was hit was retail. Now you see what used to be a bookstore online is the highest valued companies on the planet, Amazon. And you see e-commerce companies are cracking the traditional retailers one by one, unless they go omni-channel. The third wave hit transactional B2B sales, where it used to be cold calls and meetings, and then it became content search, form fills, online demos. Politics was hit rather recently. You've seen Obama, Trump, but also this happens in most countries, where the ones that really understood the digital media landscape and the social media landscape got such an upper hand that they won elections. Before it used to be TV debates and print articles, now it's a different game. Politics and large deals have many commonalities. One is that you need a lot of votes to win a deal. So large deals are also influenced by this digital transformation. And now you need to be way more media and marketing heavy to win the large contracts. Before it was men like myself, middle-aged, that went out having dinners, shook hands, a bit exaggerated, but now it's very media driven. I started my first company when I was about 10 years old. As a 25-year-old, I started my first real company with about 40 employees. In the beginning of this journey, we grew very fast. We were selling into large retailers around Europe. After a while, the growth flattened out, and then it actually declined, and we failed the company. We bankrupted. And when analyzing this was actually a horrible period, but when analyzing this, the main reason for the failure was that I could not scale marketing and sales selling into larger corporations. It was dependent on me, so I was the rainmaker. In the beginning, that felt great, actually. Being a young person carrying a larger and larger company, you can get some kind of kick out of that. However, after a while, I realized that that is actually horrible. If you can't scale marketing and sales beyond yourself, it actually doesn't scale eventually. One of the things I decided was to never ever fail again due to not being able to scale marketing and sales selling into large corporations. So that was the trigger behind what is now Megadeals. When selling into companies that are organized as matrices or even more complex cubes, and when they're buying cross-functionally and not single-functionally, and when you as a company, you as a vendor, are selling as a team as opposed to an individual, the logic behind selling changes from traditional selling into orchestration. You'll hear more about that soon. Companies that have those three layers are a really good fit for the Megadeals discipline and for us as a company. We follow the Megadeals discipline ourselves, even though we are not doing as large deals as you probably are. So typically, a potential customer, or what becomes a customer of ours, they consume the book, our podcast, our webinars, our short videos online, etc. They might see our ads, and at some point they reach out and say, we've seen you guys, we've heard what you do, we like it, we want to have a meeting. So as a response, and you can think about that when watching this, please ask for it, we send an executive summary. We say, okay, here is an executive summary of the discipline. Before we have a meeting, watch it, and then you decide, do I want to work like this? If the decision is yes, we probably want to work according to the Megadeals discipline, then we book a meeting. Some clients continue on their own after the 4 half days workshop. Some want to engage us further, and then we have something we call the factory, where we either help them on a few specific deals if that's a larger organization. If it's a scale up, we typically come in for 6 to 24 months and help them to set up and run the marketing towards their enterprise and Megadeals. 2007, I started the first account-based marketing company in the world. And we eventually had over 100 Fortune 500 companies as clients. We also had over 400 B2B tech scale-ups as clients. With these companies, it was very obvious that they did things around the larger deals that were not described in any literature. When we had breaks, I often talked to the sales executives and the marketing executives and also some of the sales professionals, like, where do you study these deals? Where are they described? They said there is no literature on large deals and Megadeals. And this was fascinating to me because That money stream is potentially the second largest money stream in the world after mergers and acquisitions. And it was not documented, it was not researched. And that further triggered me and my team to do research on these large deals. In the beginning, we thought that these particularities found in the megadeal space was only used there. But moving down to medium-sized deals, so-called enterprise deals, we saw that there's no literature describing them either. So when you look at how to combine marketing, sales, social selling, etc. as one discipline, there is no description of it. We see a few common challenges when we look at companies that do either mega deals or enterprise deals. And the first one is a very significant rainmaker dependency. So even the largest companies in the world are dependent on a handful of people to make these multi-billion-dollar deals. If none of them are present in orchestration these deals, they will fail at a very high likelihood. You often find that companies have a pretty good brand platform. They also have very well-developed corporate values. When it comes to messaging, it's a bit all over the place. So the messaging architecture, the messaging platform is first of all very rarely full funnel. It's very rarely coordinated across the functions. So you find messaging that's very top of the funnel at best, or you find it scattered. So marketing is saying A, sales is saying B, PR is saying C. It doesn't create trust in your target audience. Many claim that the divide between marketing and sales is driven by an organizational failure. I claim that it's not. It's driven by a lack of messaging architecture. They don't have a common language around which they communicate with the market. A third issue that we often see is that the leading companies are deal-centric in their marketing, whereas the laggards are lead-centric. So they are way too focused on generating leads and then hand it over to sales, and sales is doing the rest. The leading companies are not doing that. They are deal-centric. Oftentimes, companies are lacking a systematic approach on how to win enterprise and mega deals. It resides in the head of very few stakeholders, and often they struggle to describe what they do to their colleagues. We noticed this when doing the research because in the beginning, we interviewed mega dealers based on a white paper and asked open questions, and we got really weird answers. Most people are not good at creating metadata of what they actually do. It's like asking a sportsman or a sportswoman, how do you play the best tennis in the world? They are not necessarily good at describing that. Another challenge found in most laggard companies is that they're way too analog in the way they treat customers. So very senior salespeople can be very charismatic in front of an audience or inside a room, but when put in front of a video camera or a webinar, they really lose it. So in general, sales and leaders need to become way more media. What we often see as well is that companies talk too much about themselves, about their functions and features, instead of talking about change drivers, category choices, subcategory choices, etc. There is actually a seventh challenge, and this is found only in the largest companies in the world. Typically in large companies, they have large product portfolios and large service portfolios. And the marketing money is not placed close to the deal, it's placed in the product units. So the consequence of this is that they shoot lead generation from many product units into the same account. First of all, that's very confusing and not creating trust. The second issue is that the deal team doesn't get access to the money. They don't have the funds to influence this deal.
So now I will take you through very briefly the 5 cornerstones of the Megadeals discipline. In the executive summary and also in our longer programs and workshop, we go into details. We spend actually days on this. Key initiatives are the means through which a company's vision is translated into practice. So think about the vision and then you divide that into smaller steps. If what you're selling or offering to the customer doesn't align with at least one of their key initiatives, you want to disqualify in order to have a bigger yes to the ones you're going after. Number 2 out of the 5 cornerstones is about mapping the ecosystem. Mapping the ecosystem within the organization you're going after, but also outside of that ecosystem. All this to drive consensus in this huge and complex ecosystem. The third cornerstone is considered to be the hardest. It's when you have found the right prospects and clients to work with, you map them out, and then you start to drive consensus at scale. You do that by clearly defining a messaging. You turn that messaging into content and you use a number of different tactics, both physical and digital touchpoints. All this to drive consensus. Trojan Horses is the fourth one. All the megadealers that we interviewed for the book said the same thing. If you don't have them, you will not be able to sign a megadeal. The Trojan Horses feed you with information that you can't get hold of the official ways. As salespeople, we are schooled to talk about the upside and the value, the product, the benefits and the features. We often forget that value just brings you through the door, but it's actually risk mitigation that closes the deal.
A key trend we are seeing at the moment is how businesses balance the investment between marketing and sales. We still see many businesses investing much more heavily on the sales side, and especially on the headcount salespeople. There is a shift now where we in the successful companies that works towards enterprise and mega deals see much more of a 50-50 split between marketing and sales, resulting in building really complex marketing activities around the sales team to start to scale the business and influence all the stakeholders in the complex ecosystem. That trend is actually becoming more and more extreme. So in a few years, we predict that this will be much more of a 70-30 split between marketing and sales. The final key takeaway is that we're still observing a lot of businesses creating content, but they are not distributing the content, but rather let it sit on their website. The key is to take that content and distribute it to the stakeholders in the ecosystem, to start to win votes, to sway decisions your way.
To give you an initial image, you need to have swim lanes to support the large deals. You have to have a messaging architecture as the spine of what you do. You need to develop content based on the messaging architecture. You need to orchestrate the content based on a good MarTech and media flow. And you need to have people on both ends, so the salespeople and the marketing running it.
So now we're coming to one of my favorite parts, which is the DNA of Megadeals, and it's what we call the messaging architecture. The three key parts of the messaging architecture are the fundamental messaging, the deal closing messaging, and the orientational messaging. The fundamental messaging takes the customer from unaware to wanting to buy. The deal closing messaging takes the customer from wanting to buy to signing the deal. And the orientational messaging attracts a broader audience to take notice of you and your solution. So let me now talk to you about the fundamental messaging, which is, by its name, the fundamental part of the messaging architecture. And you need to think about this as the decision tree or the decision journey that the client needs to go through before they even think about picking your specific solution. So let me walk you through the different parts of the fundamental messaging. So at the bottom of the fundamental messaging, why this vendor, is where we see a lot of businesses spend a lot of their time. So they talk and communicate a lot around the benefits and features of their products. The problem with this is that when all your competitors do exactly the same, it's difficult for the customer to differentiate between you and the other ones. Slightly more advanced organizations talk about the change drivers first. And these are the changes that are going on in the client's industry, organization that's impacting them in some way. So it's either creating a pain for the client, or if they make the change, it creates a gain. But what we observe that most organizations miss out on is two of the most important parts of the messaging architecture. It's what we call the category and subcategory choice. Now, what do we mean by that? If you as an organization, due to the changes going on in your environment, have a pain that you need to solve, you will first look at the different categories of options that you have to solve that pain. You won't directly dive down and look at a specific product or solution. you'll start to evaluate different categories of solutions. So as a business, it is critical that you understand, based on the change drivers and the pain that it creates, what are the different categories of solutions to solve that pain. And once you understand what the different category choices are that the customer can choose to solve that pain, you need to understand what is your category choice and how does that category choice, not your solution, but category choice, compete with the other categories of solutions that they're evaluating. And so you need to understand the pros and cons of your category choice against the other categories. And one of two things can happen. Either your category choice is the strongest one and you can continue to evaluate the client, or you realize that you're not the strongest category, and in that case, disqualify quickly. So once you've identified the category choice that you represent amongst the different category choices, there will be a number of subcategory choices that the client can choose from to help solve the similar pain. And you need to understand which subcategory choice do you represent and how does it compete with the other subcategory solutions to help solve a similar pain. So now we've identified a number of layers in the customer's journey. We've looked at the change drivers that are going on in the customer's environment. We've identified the pains that creates, or the gains it would create if they changed. We've identified what categories of solutions do they have to solve that specific pain. What's your category of solution? And based on your category of solution, what subcategories of solutions are there to solve a similar pain? The next step is then to understand, based on your subcategory of solution, how does that stack up against other types of solutions? And this you do by identifying the different capabilities that your solution has versus the capabilities of competing solutions.
One of the things that makes us extremely happy is the feedback that we get from our partners and clients. We score 9.5 out of 10 on our workshops. We take every opportunity to fine-tune and adjust to become better every day.
So there are more than 30 things we haven't covered in this very short video, but I'll mention a few. We did not cover the full depth of the messaging architecture. Neither did we cover the recommended content formats. We didn't cover either the 5 cornerstones, and they're typically covered in several hour workshops. We didn't cover negotiations, lobbying, project financing, organizational design and related KPIs. We didn't cover the orchestration schedule. We didn't cover the details in the MarTech, nor the sales activities, etc., just to mention a few.
If you haven't already watched the 50 minutes executive summary from Megadeals Advisory, please let us know and we happily send it to you. You can also find a lot of valuable content on YouTube, Megadeals Advisory, and our podcast. If you are committed to make bigger deals faster with less resources, don't hesitate to reach out to us.